A little girl found a dying stray dog, so she was kind enough not only to treat its wounds, and gave it food, and brought it home. But the little girl's father saw a dog taller than his daughter sitting at home early in the morning. He was shocked when he realized he didn't want her to have a dog. After all, they were already living in poverty. Now they have another mouth to feed. He couldn't afford it. The little girl couldn't disobey her father's decision. She could only bring the dog back to the place where she found it. She stroked him gently. She gave him a big hug. Then she let go of the leash and turned to leave, but she had just taken 2 steps. The dog didn't understand what the little girl was trying to do. And once again, the dog followed her. The little girl could only yell at him to sit. Then she ran away quickly with tears in her eyes. But what she didn't expect, when she got home, the dog was already back. The little girl couldn't send the dog away anymore, even if she didn't have food. She had to keep the dog. The little girl's father, George, had found his late wife's brother. He's looking for a job to help support his family. His wife's brother is a local gangster. For the sake of his niece, he introduced George to a job to collect debts. But what his brother really wanted was to get custody of his niece. To pay tribute to his sister in heaven. So he had his men embezzle the money on purpose. And then he framed George for it. George was not stupid. He immediately exposed the conspiracy. Then they dragged him out of the car and beat him up. George wasn't a soft touch. He wouldn't give in to his daughter. He couldn't let her follow in the footsteps of his late wife's brother. So he fought back. It's said that those who can fight are afraid of those who can't. Soon George had both of them on the ground. When he regained his senses, George called his daughter. He told her to pack her bags. He wanted to take her on a trip because George knew there was no way he was going to be able to stay here. But when he went to pick up his daughter, he found that the dog was still there. He was speechless. After all, it's hard to protect himself. He couldn't care less about the dog. George told his daughter to get in the car and leave the dog behind, but she wouldn't, and the cars behind him kept honking their horns. George had no choice but to put the dog in the car, but he didn't get very far. George stopped the car. Then he pulled the dog down as hard as he could and locked him in a junkyard. No matter how much his daughter begged him, he didn't do anything about it. He just hit the gas and took off. All the dog could do was watch the little girl go, but he couldn't afford to lose her again. So he found a low place and jumped out, but there was no sign of the little girl. The dog still wouldn't give up. He kept running wildly after the girl's scent. On the other side, the little girl couldn't let go of the dog. She knew the dog was very smart, so she would leave her belongings behind at every place so that the dog could find her. The dog began to run day and night. When he got hungry, he ate from other dogs. When the other dogs saw how fierce he was, so the other dogs could only give in and let him eat. But it's not always possible to find such food. Just when the dog wants to eat again, he found a fat, skinny rabbit by the side of the road. So the dog chased after it, just as he reaches the hole. But there's a poisonous rattlesnake watching him. The dog knew he couldn't afford to mess with it. He can only turn around and run. And so the dog continues on its journey. But for tens of thousands of kilometers, the dog's paws are bloodied and bruised. But he doesn't rest. He just licked his tongue and kept going until he saw the mark the little girl had left for him. The dog jumped for joy because he knew he was getting closer to the little girl. So he kept going day and night, and finally he collapsed in a barn.